Hi, everyone. Welcome to Consider the Lilies. We are so pleased to have Beverly Holloway with us today, and I want to share a little bit about her. Beverly Holloway has been an independent casting director for TV and feature films for 30 years and is proud to be a member of the Casting Society of America. Throughout her career, Beverly has worked across multiple genres of film, including drama, comedy, family faith, action adventure, western, rom-com, thriller, sci-fi horror, and animation. That's awesome. Beverly is one of the casting directors for the award-winning series The Chosen, and she has worked with For King and Country in the new film Unsung Hero coming out so soon.
Yeah.
And she has other credits including The Forge with the Kendrick brothers and A Week Away, which is a Netflix musical. I Still Believe, Jeremy Camp's love story of just love and loss in his life.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I Can Only Imagine. Westerns are some of her favorite genre to work with. And
True. It's
yeah, she's
true.
been a part of Fairhaven, The Warrant 1 and 2, and the upcoming modern day Western Blue Ridge. And she's also been a part of the newly rebranded channel Great American Family, which they have a new series, Country Rescue, and it's about the current day EMT station. So welcome, Beverly. Thank you so much for
Hello.
Yes, welcome.
It sounds like a lot, but I'm old, so you can fit a lot into 30 years.
I think it's a solid credentials. I love this. I think it's great.
One of the benefits of growing old is you get really long resumes, so it's all
Yeah,
good.
you got it. You got it.
So I'm glad to be here. It's good to be here with you guys,
Yes.
and always a pleasure to chat with fellow colleagues and believers, and yeah, just kindred spirits.
Yeah, thank
Well,
you.
we are so excited to have you on. And like I mentioned before, when we were dreaming up this third season of the podcast, Brooklyn was like, I have the most incredible lady that is just on fire for women in the
Oh,
industry, for Jesus, for everything. So we are so thrilled to have you. And
well, thank
one of
you.
the first questions that we love to throw at people right off the bat when they come on the podcast, because our podcast is called Consider the Lilies, we love to look at how God sees the whole picture of our life. So, where have you seen God consider the little and small things in your story lately?
Oh my gosh. I I mean, I have there's a lot of ways actually. And this year has been a bit of a adventure and a bit of a little more mystery than I usually have, at least than I have in the last few years, because this is my first season that I'm not casting The Chosen. And so that was a very difficult decision, but The Chosen is a huge, huge project. And there's been a couple things that I've wanted to focus on, and then I just haven't because it just schedule was packed. And so while on one hand it's scary because it was typically has been through the first four seasons such a big part of my work every year. And so it's been a matter of real prayer and thinking, okay, God, well, if if that's not me, it's almost like an identity thing. You know what I mean? When
Yeah.
the show has grown so big and you become so associated with it, that there was a little bit of my insecurity of thinking, well, if I'm not the casting director for The Chosen, you know what I mean? Then who
Yeah.
am I? You know what I mean? And so that's been really um kind of a trust walk, and also I'm forced to just sort of surrender and say, okay, I'm just going to keep walking forward. And I'm excited for new opportunities and new producers that I get to work with, and directors and actors. And so it's great, but it's a little scary, anytime you make that big a change. But I absolutely just have confirmation and peace that it is the right time, and it is there are new things for me to do. So while it's um uh, I feel a little less secure than I have in years past, um I'm actually really excited, of what's going to be coming, because that's the part I do know. He's if he feeds the birds and makes the flowers bloom, then how much more does he care for me? And so it's definitely a much more obvious kind of, okay, Lord, I need your provision. I need your wisdom and your guidance more so than I felt in the last few years. So it's good. It's good for me to be pushed into new areas I've wanted to go into for a long time, but I just never had the time. So it's nice. It's fun.
That's really
Absolutely.
special. And I love that you talked about the do not worry and stuff like that, because I feel like that's been a part of my story too, just recently, just trusting God with different things that I'm like, okay, he's opening doors, stuff that I didn't expect. But
Right.
I will walk into it faithfully because, like he's going to show the way, like you said, and we can trust him. And I think that's really a beautiful part. Just seeing
Yeah.
him work in our lives and really bring
Yeah.
in things that we never would imagine for ourselves.
Yeah. And I have a huge kind of time in my life in the last 5 years that and I consider it now a big part of my testimony of God knowing what we need before we have any clue, setting us up to be protected and provided for before we have any inkling that we're going to need it. He's already 4, 5, 10 steps ahead of us and guiding us. And if that's ever happened to you, it's a situation surrounding my move to the Boise area, because I keep an office in Burbank with Kappa Studios, wonderful post-production house. They do the post-production for The Chosen as well. But I now live up outside of Boise, Idaho, and my family's up here. But when that nudging came to make the move, it made no professional sense. It made no logical sense, but I just knew I was supposed to do it. And as much as I kept questioning it and I had others praying for me, it never wavered. It was like, no, I'm supposed to do this and I'm supposed to do this now. And then I moved up here, and 4 months later, it became crystal clear why he had moved me here when he did. Not only a personal thing with my family, but then COVID hit. And I would have been down in my house by myself, no family, nobody to go through that with. Whereas I was up here with my family, we kind of quarantined together. And so we still had each other, So while I think that was sort of the secondary reason for the move, it was just so obvious to me and so powerful when you realize he cares that much for us, that he is preparing a path, that he is cares for you so much that he wants to make sure that you are safe, that you're protected, that you're surrounded by exactly who you're going to need in those times. So yeah, I will continue to share that journey because it's powerful when you realize God loves you that much.
It's your testimony. It's just like it's so cool to see him move in your career, but move in your life, like personally, like taking those intentional choices and being like, okay, God's got me. He led me this far. He's going to lead me on. And so that is just beautiful. Thank you for sharing that personal part of just like that side of trusting the Lord, because I think that's very, very important to like really see that the story of someone sharing those deeper parts and like how really.
So and at the end of the day, our careers are just one part of who we are,
Exactly.
And so when I made the move, I made it with the understanding, because it was pre-COVID, when it was right before COVID when I made the move. So this whole idea of remote casting and things like that wasn't as much a thing. And so I made the move completely knowing that it could mean I wasn't casting anymore. That's how strongly I knew I was supposed to move, because I was at the point where I would give it up. If that's like, I knew God was calling me to move. I knew that didn't make professional sense. So it was, okay, God, I'm going to trust you anyway. And then I've been busier since I moved than before I moved. He opened up projects, and then, I mean, that obviously COVID was challenging and hard, and there was a great deal of loss. But what did come out of it was a lot, at least in my profession, that allows us to work remotely. And also, it's opened up opportunities like Brooklyn, this, because you're not in what would be considered a major market. And I see actors now from all over, way more than I did pre-COVID, because really it was about whoever could walk into my office and get in the room. That's how we saw people. And now I'm seeing actors from all over for every single project. And so it's exciting. And, there are some positives and some opportunities that have come out of it, for sure. But it wasn't an obvious path. It was a real trust walk. But man, it just, I think I've shared my life verse is Philippians 4, 6, and 7. And that idea that, you pray, you give thanks, and then you turn it over to God, and he doesn't say, then I'll tell you what it all means, or I'll give you all the answers. He just says, I'll give you peace. At this peace that surpasses all understanding. And I can tell you with all of my heart, that's exactly what he's done. I don't have the answers, but I had that peace that it was exactly what I was supposed to be doing. So, yeah.
Oh, so beautiful. Oh my goodness. I love it so much. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Our next question is, we're going to go back to the beginning of the career. So how did you become a casting director, and what made you so passionate about being a part of the film industry?
Yeah, well, I had a different career for most of my 20s, but I was doing a lot of theater. I had an acting background through high school and early college, and I had a dad who he was an engineer. He did not understand like the creative arts world at all, and he was scared so much for me to, get a real job, or, kind of go a more, what he felt like was a more safe and expectable path. And so I did try to do that for a while. And it's one of those things where you can do it. Like I could have continued doing what I was doing, but my heart was just being pulled in the creative arts. And so I began directing and producing theater and community theater and children's theater, and then big productions at my church, which I went to a pretty large church in Orange County, California. And so at that church, a good friend of mine was a filmmaker, one of the early pioneers. His name's John Schmidt. He's now a professor at Biola University. But he was one of the pioneers in the Christian film world. He was making films when very few were. And so I went to him, and I felt like, from what I had kind of seen and gleaned, that, and it has proven to be true, filmmaking, other than being on the acting side, although even that, filmmaking involves both creative and business. Whether it's you guys, as an actor, handling the business side of your career, or understanding how the business plays into it. If you're a DP or a camera person or whatever, understanding the different choices that you make affect the budget, and you have to understand how that affects the bigger picture. It's all hand in hand. And so I felt like that was a good place for me, a place where because I'm not a pure creative and I'm not a pure business person. I really am a split down the middle. So I went to him and just said, I think it's a world that I might fit into well. And could I please be involved with your next project, and I'll intern, I'll work for whatever. Our joke was I would get him fruity drinks and, whatever, empty the trash, whatever else he needed. And that's something I tell younger people who are just starting out a lot, which is just go be in the environment and go be of service. So that at that time I was an intern. I turned 30 on my first film set. And, so you're a 30-year-old making $50 a week. That was what we made on the film, and just starting at ground zero. But it was a great opportunity. And it was him who put me in the casting slot first because he needed help in that area. I had an acting background and a directing background and producing background. So it just made sense to him to have me help in that area. So I really just was self-taught and sort of figuring things out. And so I was doing that plus other like production coordinating. I did wardrobe once, and that was a miserable failure. There's a children's series somewhere with a scene where the kid comes in a striped shirt. We do a cutaway to the mom, and we go back to him, and he's in a solid shirt because I didn't know what I was doing. Thankfully, that series doesn't really see the light of day anymore since it was 30 years ago. But yeah, that wasn't my thing. And that's kind of, again, that's another thing that I talk to people who are just starting out. Sometimes you don't know what exactly you want to do or where your place is, but by just doing things and being there and being around it and learning it, you naturally things start to fall away. So that's exactly what happened with me. The wardrobe thing fell away really quickly. I knew that was not my place. And then, but I was also production coordinator. I was ADing. So I would cast the films and then go on to set. And I was usually like the second AD or second AD. I didn't realize that wasn't a thing. It seemed logical to me, but looking back now, I realized because the actors would be like, wait, weren't you the casting director? I'm like, yeah. And now you're the second AD. Yeah. I didn't know what I didn't know, but that time when I was in production was so valuable to me. I wouldn't change it at all. I learned so much. And while casting directors don't typically have to know the intricacies of production, it is really, really helpful because I also understand the needs of the directors and the producers as far as that on-set environment and that shooting environment and how intense it can be, how fast-paced it can be, how important the teamwork and the camaraderie, the spirit of like the actors, are they team players? Are they others minded? Divas don't really work well in that environment. It can be very frustrating. And so, I just learned a lot about obviously you want great actors, but you also want great actors who are good people and who are in it for the bigger picture, not just for their little moment in the spotlight, So I learned a lot that way. And so just one by one, all the other things fell away and casting was this consistent, and that's where I've been ever since. So yeah, a little bit of a winding journey to get there, but I got there.
No, that's great. I think that's so true too, of like just the entertainment business in general, like you need to try like all the different things to find, what is best and what maybe God's calling you and nudging you towards. Right. I think Brooklyn and I can both attest that we've literally put ourselves in so many different environments just to see, what works and what doesn't and what we like. So
yeah. And I think it's part of the way that God guides you, right? Is you just, again, you just have a sense of like, this isn't my thing. Like, okay, let me put that aside because I'm not feeling either. I'm knowing I'm not really built for it. And that was kind of the AD thing, which is, could I do it? Yes. Did I love it? Not really. I just wasn't, I didn't feel like it was fully me. And the casting was always fully me because it's literally creative and business. And that's exactly the mix I feel I am. So sometimes it is the way that God can just give you the experience. Because like I said, everything I did helped me to be stronger, even as a casting director. But I do think you get a sense of like, oh, okay, this feels right. This is connecting right. I'm getting positive feedback and I'm getting open doors, so God can use that. But every bit of your experience, making fruity drinks and emptying the trash cans will absolutely be not done in vain. Those are efforts and time not wasted. So. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, how have you seen just faith-based and inspirational content grow over these last couple of years? Because you worked on numerous faith-based films and television shows. How have you seen it grow and evolve and change?
Yeah, it's incredible. And I never set out to work in the faith space, but John Schmidt, his projects, that's where he, like I said, he was a pioneer in the space. And so I just began working in the space by default because that's where he did his films and creating. And so as a result, I learned a lot about the audience and about sort of the boundaries and nuances of the faith world and the faith audience, and what they seem to respond well to, what they don't. And so that, as the faith-based film making world expanded, that became valuable knowledge to the newer filmmakers, right? Is having an understanding, because John started making movies for the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, and those films were completely funded. It was sort of crowdfunding before crowdfunding was a thing, because they were completely funded by donors to the Billy Graham organization. And so because of that, you had to really respect what they wanted, what they responded well to, what kind of brushed up against them a little bit. And it's similar to what we know now about like the Chosen crowdfunding and some of the other pieces that are being crowdfunded. It really matters. That audience will speak up and be very vocal, in the positive, very vocal about their enthusiasm, and they feel a part of it. They feel like, they're part of the effort, which is fantastic. And they want to be included. They want to be included, and they will be very loyal and faithful and your best advocates. And so that was something early on I was learning before I really knew that's what I was learning. And so I think as the more and more filmmakers came out and started doing that, it's super exciting. Then we started having all kinds of different faith filmmakers. And because early on, there wasn't as much of a variation of like the genre or the styles or the kind of the look and feel, right? They were a little more kind of similar to each other. And then certain filmmakers would start to break out, and everyone would kind of say, oh, we can do that. Okay, that's interesting, and push the boundaries a little bit of what can be done. And then you ended up with filmmakers like the Kendricks, who are very clear about who their audience is. They're making films for the church. They are unapologetic about that. That is their passion, and that's where they feel that God has called them to be deliberately. And so their movies are very different in tone or in kind of the storylines than, say, the Erwin brothers or Kingdom Story, where they're a little more, they're true story driven. And so those are typically people and subjects that are people of faith, but that's the POV through which the story is being told, as opposed to having a specific kind of spiritual target that they're trying to hit. They're just telling people stories who happen to be people of faith. And so you're experiencing the faith side of it organically through who these people are. And then like I said, I've done Westerns now, faith-based Westerns. I've done faith-based, horror's too strong a word. I tend to say more thriller or sort of psychological thriller. And that would be more like, I didn't do Nefarious, but that's the one that's coming to mind as an example, pushing the envelope about in that genre, but still staying true to scripture. So that's one of the things I've seen grow, is just the kinds of stories and the styles within the faith-based world. There's now all these different genres that people are representing. And then we have way more places for the content to go, right? Before, there was no Pure Flix before, or, Great American Family, or some of those channels. Now there is, and you have studios, Sony Affirm and Lionsgate, who are willing to jump in on projects and go literally hand in hand with the filmmakers and developing that. And that didn't exist before either. And that's a large part, I think, because of the audience. The audience is proving and saying very clearly that we will support this material. We will go and, spend money for the tickets if it's the kind of content we can get behind and that we can feel great about. And so really that's always why opening weekends are so important, because everyone, including the studios, the financiers, whoever, everyone is waiting to see, is the audience going to support this? Is this the kind of story that they're going to get behind? And, we've had wonderful movies that have not been financially successful initially. And everyone kind of scratches their head, and we go back and try to figure out why, what was missed. And there's, we're humans. So there's always, you make a decision and you got to just go with it, and sometimes you can, in hindsight, say, okay, I think this is where we maybe went the wrong direction or didn't make the best decision. But then sometimes it's just, you realize it wasn't the right time for that story, but we learn every single time, right? So even in what is quote unquote there's no failures. I can't even use that word. Those that did not perform as they had hoped. You learn so much. Those filmmakers don't make those mistakes twice. They learn and they grow, and then they move from that. So, and I find Dallas Jenkins is a perfect example, because he started working at his church because the resurrection of Gavin Stone had been what was considered a commercial failure. And so he just I thought that I was doing exactly what I was supposed to do, that, God would absolutely, bring that to success. And when that didn't happen, he was like, okay, let me regroup, because I don't know what happened there. But what's interesting, as hard as that time was for him, it led to him working in the church, doing films and media for his church, which led him to make that Christmas Eve story, The Shepherd, which then led to The Chosen, and then look where we are now. It's so, granted, at the time that piece didn't make sense to him, and now it absolutely was necessary for him to get to where they are now, and that's another, just like we started out talking, right? The Consider the Lilies. It's like God didn't use any of that to waste. All of that was a piece of where God knew he needed to be, not just as a filmmaker, but even, we humble our hearts a lot of times when we're in that scary place or that mystery. I'm not feeling all, cocky and proud and confident, right? I'm feeling like, okay, God, I'm not really sure why this season is like this right now. I'm not exactly sure what to do. And so we're a lot more vulnerable. At least I am a lot more vulnerable, a lot more willing to hear and seek. So it's important, that we go through those seasons, because it shapes who we are for the next season coming.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And I feel like that's been something that God's been awakening in my heart too. Just like what you're doing now is like you're just continuing to learn and grow, and this is just a time for me to get for us to commune with God. We get to go deeper with God, and we get to trust more and see like, oh, he was working out all these things in my past for my present, where I'm at right now. And I'm just learning to live like right here, right now in my present, and just allowing myself to feel like, okay, God, here I am. Whatever I have to do today, I'm just going to surrender that to you. And I'm just going to take each moment and like do it the best that I can. And that's really what we're supposed to be doing. We can't look too far behind of like our, maybe some things that we think are mistakes, but really we're just learning curves. And then sometimes we're too far ahead and think, oh, I want it to be like this. But it's like, well, you know what? Let's just live presently. Think about those dreams and goals, but just like allow ourselves to live this life that we are supposed to be living. And that's been something in my life that I've really been noticing, and I've been loving, because I'm noticing little things in my family and friends that I feel like I'm almost I would almost miss because I'm thinking about something else. And it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm gonna live right now. This is where I'm at. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a beautiful journey, and I'm so glad you brought that up about those seasons. Um,
Yeah.
so that's beautiful.
Yeah. As someone, I tend to be a little bit of a control freak. And so that was one of the things that I had to really early on in my career release that because, working in the faith space, ego comes to play. And it's like, no, I want to do the big movies. I want to do the studio movies. I don't want to do the movies that the agents are like, who? What are you doing? What is this? Who's the director? And of course, we've all experienced when you tell someone you're in the film industry and they say, so what have you done? Would I know any of it? And it's like, no, probably not. And again, this was earlier in my career
Yes.
because again, the faith-oriented projects weren't getting a main stage opportunity. So people didn't really know them if they weren't in really deeply in the faith space as far as their entertainment that they were seeking out. And so I had to go through the like, okay, God, it's not showy. It's not, I want to go do what those other casting directors are doing. I want to do those kinds of movies. I had a lot of envy and far too competitive of a spirit. And God really took me through a time to work that out. And I'm so glad because it's just interesting all these years later, you are part of these movies that are some of the most successful, not just within the faith space. I Can Only Imagine was like the #1 independent film that year that of any genre. And you realize, oh my gosh, it's just incredible to be a part of that. And I wouldn't change it for anything. Like, I don't want to go, I'm not longing to go work in other places or like a certain level of accolade or whatever. It's like, I'm good. Like, I'm thankful. And you're thankful partially because you realize, like you went through that, you had to battle kind of through that. And that's one of the interesting things about being in the faith world, right? The faith filmmaking world is it's just we just have a different reasoning behind why we do what we do. And it may not be necessarily the most mainstream, visually glamorous or, big projects that everyone will know, but you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And if we're bringing our level of excellence every time, as if it was the biggest movie possible, that's what we need to do, right? We need to work as if we're doing the $100 million, studio picture. That's the level we need to work at and bring to the table. So yeah, it's just interesting how God, it goes right back to what we've been saying, which is how God is navigating our path, even when we don't really know it, and using every piece of it ultimately for good. And it's when you look, again, me being the old one, the old lady,
No,
but
no.
I have 30 years to look back and see it now so clearly when I was starting to where I am now. And so that would be my encouragement to you youngsters. I'm making it sound like I'm ancient, but you have a few years to look back. Trust me, in 30 years, you'll be able to absolutely see God's hand through each month and each year. And it's incredible. It's incredible. It really is.
Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, I love that, and I think the thing about looking back in your life, I think it's cool to see like um, the beauty of whatever that was in your life. Like when you
Mhm.
are able to like maybe journal it, put it somewhere in a place that you can just like keep that in your mind. Like, okay, remember where God had me, but remember where He has me. Like,
Mhm.
know where He has me now. Like, it's not. I'm
Yeah.
not that person anymore.
Yeah.
I am just so glad I'm not that person
Yeah.
anymore. Continually be thankful that you're not. But it's a
Right.
beautiful thing to live in
Yeah.
that freedom of like, okay, here we are,
Yeah.
and living out what God has.
Yeah.
And so our last little farewell to you at this point, we're gonna have to say goodbye, but we want to ask, how can we keep up with you in your career? Like what in what way can we communicate with you? How can we keep up with you? We'd love to know that for our audience.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I probably the easiest is either Facebook page, which is Beverly Holloway Casting, or I do have an Instagram account, which I think is just BH Casting, is the Instagram ID. And then almost every Tuesday, with a few exceptions, but almost every Tuesday I do Let's Talk Tuesday, and it's Facebook Live, but we're also, I think it goes live on Instagram and on YouTube. So I have a YouTube channel if you want to go and go back and see any of those. We're in our second year doing that every Tuesday. And so I think all of the past ones are there if you want to go back. And that's normally asking or answering questions from whoever is joining us. Brooklyn, you've been a faithful one, and I love seeing you and asking questions and encouraging. The other thing I love about that is that it's not just me answering the questions, but we've grown to this kind of family to where everyone's answering each other's questions with their own experiences or things they've learned. And it's really become quite a sort of encouraging group. And so, yeah, I'd say that. So it's Let's Talk Tuesday nights at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific. We go for about 45 minutes usually. So that's probably the easiest.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. Me and Megan, I know that, I mean, I've enjoyed it for myself.
Yes, I've loved it too. It's been so fun.
It's been
You guys are awesome. You guys are awesome. I appreciate it.
Yes,
Love you
thank
too.
you for joining us. Again,
Absolutely.
we've been looking forward to this for so long, and it's been great.
Well, it's my joy and my pleasure. And I wish the absolute best for you guys. I'm so glad that our future generation includes people like you, and we're in good hands.
Oh, we love you so much. You're just as sweet as ever.
Well, I mean that sincerely. So very, very excited that you guys are leading the charge coming up next.